Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm going to be talking about the new album from Eliot Lipp, Come to Life. Eliot Lipp is a former member of the Pretty Lights music label, at least that's how I got to know who the guy was. I remember the one Pretty Lights concert I went to. Pretty Lights had two opening acts, and Eliot Lipp was the first one. The other was Supervision, but he admittedly wasn't very good. Well, I did like Eliot Lipp's live set, though, and he might have been even better than Pretty Lights himself, although I blame my lack of enjoyment at that concert on the fact that the bass volume was up so high you couldn't hear anything else. Eliot Lipp was the only one who actually sounded good the whole time that night. Now, you may also recall that when I reviewed the new Grammatic EP not too long ago, I also mentioned that Eliot Lipp was the one guy in the PLM label that I most wanted to give a second chance. This is because by the time I actually looked into Eliot Lipp's discography in depth, I had already worn myself out from electro hip-hop soul and PLM and all those guys, and I wasn't really able to get into his stuff as much as I wanted to. Not to mention, Eliot Lipp was one of the few PLM names that mostly focused on synth work, and pretty much all the other names on PLM had some pretty noticeable weaknesses in that area. Take Pretty Lights himself, for instance, who, I've always considered his dubstep breakdowns to be mostly just decent. He was always so much better with sampling than he was at synthesizers, in my opinion. The same went with most of the other names signed to PLM. I suppose Paul Basic was pretty good at it, but I digress. The thing is, though, Eliot Lipp does not make dubstep. He focused almost entirely on synth work for much of his discography, but he had a noticeably different sound and feel from the rest of PLM crew that I couldn't really put my finger on at the time. Fast forward to now, when I gave Grammatic his second chance, and he turned out mixed results. But I did not expect to be giving Eliot Lipp his second chance so quickly after that. I did have to skip the guy's debut album since I couldn't find a digital version anywhere, but I went down everything else. How did he turn out? Well, I'll go down his discography so far. More or less the beginning of his usual style. I never really got into this one at first, but it is pretty solid overall. Basically a shorter and less memorable version of the previous album. This is a collection of remixes and outtakes, I think. Again, not one of his best, but it's got a bunch of pretty memorable moments as well. Similar material to that on Steel Street Scraps, but much more well put together and well executed. This one is a further improvement, now with a lot of city ambience in between tracks to make things even more interesting. Even better, some of his most memorable melodies on this one. Also, every track on here is 4 minutes and 20 seconds long, because we jokes. This is his debut on Pretty Lights Music, the first album from him that I heard. It is a noticeable change from his usual style in that it's a bit more hip-hop inspired than usual, but there are quite a few gem tracks on here, definitely worth checking out. This one has a surprising focus on sampling. I mean, sampling was somewhat touched on in Shark Wolf Rabbit Snake, but this almost sounds like a straight Pretty Lights album in some parts. But it is a dang good one. Which brings us to now. I think the best way to describe Eliot Lipp's usual style would be synth funk. Though he samples stuff occasionally, and he is pretty good at that too, what I like most about Lipp is how he comes up with his own melodies all the time, based on funk and soul and even jazz occasionally, resulting in lots of memorable tracks. And even when his songs didn't stick in your head, they were at least a lot of fun to listen to, with lots of 80s-inspired synth settings and even some more organic textures on more recent projects. Speaking of organic textures, that seems to be what Eliot Lipp had his sights set on this time around. The story behind this album seems to be that Eliot Lipp, having lived in New York for quite a long time, along with other cities like Los Angeles and even here in Chicago, according to his website, he returned to the place where he grew up in Tacoma, Washington, and was on the spot inspired to make a new album with more analog tones based around returning to his roots. While there was certainly a lot more natural and live-sounding instrumentation, like Rhodes electric pianos, guitars, violins, flutes, regular pianos among the usual synthesizer work. Some of the above, I guess, was from sampling, though it's kind of difficult to tell in some areas. Even some subtle singing as well, probably from the guy himself. The question is it any good, though? Well, yeah, duh, it's great. Melody-wise, he's just as on point as he's always been, and nearly every moment on this album brings a smile to my face. I suppose one thing that does characterize these songs from his usual work is that they do seem to be a lot more emotional sounding than usual, perhaps thanks to him returning home and having all those old memories return. That being said, other than that, there's really not that much to report, I'm gonna be honest. The album succeeds in all the ways that Eliot Lipp's other material has. Lots of great melodies, interesting synth patterns and instrumentation, and lots of fun to be had. I've listened to it quite a bit, but I can't say I have a ton to say about it. It's not very ambitious. In fact, it's a really short album as well, only about 35 minutes total. That being said, for what we're given, it does its job very well, and I would certainly recommend it. It's nothing that made me think really hard or surprise me a ton, but I got a lot of enjoyment out of it nonetheless. It's simple, but effective. If you've got a half hour to spare and haven't heard any Eliot Lipp yet, this would be a nice place to start. I'd say it's totally worth checking out. I'm overall feeling a 7.7 out of 10. Favorite tracks: The Entrance, Low Key, Drunk Walk, Not Quite Awake, Till the End, Tracker, and Come to Life. Least favorite track, Up, I guess. Even that one's good. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.